New Zealand's love affair with horses dates back to the early days of European settlement. So when 100 years ago World War I was declared and New Zealanders enlisted, thousands of horses were offered too. In his book on the Sinai-Palestine campaign, Colonel Charles Guy Poles of the Wellington Mounted Rifles said of the horse, "He is more than a friend. He's part of the soldier's very life."
He who has once ridden into action with bullets whistling past his ears and the shells bursting around him will never forget his horse, how the good steed became verily a part of his body, a glorified body that carried him whithersoever he willed.
The government called up 10,000 horses for the war effort. Some were offered as gifts. One from a woman who said she had no sons, so she'd send her horse instead. One of the donated horses was a black thoroughbred allocated to Colonel Poles. He called her Bess. She left Wellington in October 1914, bound for Egypt. They were tethered in cramped stalls, some exposed to the weather. About 100 died during the trip, heartbreaking for the men who loved their horses. Nearly all the horses went first to Egypt to train in the desert. Most, like Bess, were for the mounted brigades. About 4,000 were used for transport. Colonel Poles was a veteran of the South African War. He survived the Gallipoli defeat and returned to Egypt and Bess, preparing for the Sinai-Palestine campaign to defeat the Ottoman troops. He wrote,
"The main body men found their own horses again, and many happy meetings there were between man and horse. The strain of Anzac had gone, and we were moving off, not this time on our feet, but in our rightful manner upon our beloved horses."
Between the battles and the hostile terrain, Colonel Poles had time to reflect.
The great wonder of the desert is its all-embracing silence. Over the swelling sandhills they come, line upon line. Noiseless they go, no sound but the snort of a horse as she blows dust from her nostrils, or the click of stirrup irons touching as two riders close in together. All with faces turned to the promised land. Following us, a band of tall, silent, swarthy Sikhs on huge Indian camels.
As they fought their way towards Jerusalem in 1917, a soldier wrote that some horses went without water for up to 72 hours.
"It was worth a month's pay to see old Charlie stick his head down and drink, and drink, and drink."
Although horses were essential for desert warfare, heat, sandstorms and shellfire took their toll. In Europe on the Western Front, horses were not immune to the carnage. They suffered from shellfire, bullets, bombing and the mud. A soldier recalls the misery.
After the noise of the explosion, there was only the long, drawn-out groan from the unfortunate animals, and then the rattle of their chains and dull thuds as they fell.
It's not known how many horses survived the war. Bess was one of the lucky ones. Every Anzac Day there's a gathering at Bess's grave in the Rangitike to remember the 10,000 New Zealand horses sent into the firing line in World War I. They served in the Middle East and on the Western Front in Europe. Only 4 returned. They were officers' horses. Bess died in 1934, being ridden by Colonel Poles. She's buried where she fell. The Poles family supports the call for a memorial for all New Zealand's war horses.